it's a game of margins with Canada, right? You come out in the way that we did against Mexico, I like our chances. I think we beat Canada with that type of attitude and mentality. Now we've got a couple changes in the team, but Canada are still at that point where they've got talent and then they've still got the chip on their shoulder, right? And that, it didn't work out in the World Cup. But in CONCACAF, that's where they thrive. They still believe they are the kings of CONCACAF currently based on how they finished in World Cup qualifying, right? There is this belief in their team, and they are going to come out, and it's not going to be the way Mexico respected the U.S., right? The U.S. might press Canada, and they might get out of the press, right? They get out on the wings with the Tejan Buchanan. He'll run you down. Doesn't matter. Joe Scally, Sergino, Dest, wherever Buchanan ends up on the field, he'll run at you. Robinson, you know what I mean? So I think in those ways, we saw the same thing in qualifying. By and large, the same team that we're going to roll out is going to be the same team that played Canada in qualifying. But Canada came out with that mentality of like, we're going to make it hell for you. We're going to scrap for everything. We're going to fight for everything. We're going to be the ones that win every second ball. We're going to be everyone that goes a little harder into the 50-50s. We're going to make you guys have to want it more than us. And I think that's something that makes it a marginal game against Canada. Very different than Mexico, I think, already down, don't really have the quality of players that they did in the past, and are really struggling with an identity right now. Canada's a little bit different in the way that they're going to be amped for the U.S. and a chance, 90 minutes away from winning a major trophy for them, which is what they need to do outside of finishing first in qualifying, right? Because they're not going to have that this time around with 2026.
Yeah, I think what I like about Canada in particular is the identity that they've created for themselves under John Herdman. I think he's done an excellent job of playing to their strengths and to your point, having that chip on their shoulder, no matter who they're playing against, whether they're the favorites or whatever it may be. Not that they're the favorites very often, even when they play against Mexico and the U.S., but they seem to have really bought into how they want to move as a group on both sides of the ball, and that's really difficult to break down. And so that first goal, I think, is going to be, like it is in every game, very, very important in terms of what the adjustments are and what the energy is with regard to, okay, we're in this situation. What happens now? How much are we going to commit? If we have the lead, how much are we going to commit to try to make that 2? Or are we just going to try to sit on that 1? And that'll be interesting for both sides, to be honest. So I'm very excited to see this game. I thought we were going to see this in the semi. Obviously, Mexico tripped up and found themselves in a semifinal. But this is a worthy final. I'm very excited to see how it all plays out on Sunday. And I also like the depth that Canada have. I mean, they brought Alphonso Davies off the bench. That's ridiculous. You got Jonathan Osorio, who came off the bench. Junior Hoylett, who I value as a player, was the number 10 for Canada. He's coming off the bench. And then T.B. Hutchinson, obviously, a living legend, came off the bench in this one too. But so they have 13, 14 guys that are solid. I mean, solid players.
So do we. That's the thing that I like, right? Is that when I think about Pepe and Balogun, if you watched for 30 minutes even tonight, you know that Pepe and him are two different profiles, and they're both functional against almost any opponent, right? They can serve a purpose and they can do their role and they can be impactful. And I like that. I think you're going to end up going with Balogun again, obviously in the final with Pepe as an option, as opposed to when we used to go a step deeper. It was sort of a toss-up, right? Could Josh Sargent do something with it? Could Haji Wright do something with it? Could whoever it was. It was like we were already not sold on the first option. So what's the second option? So much so that we were like, let's put Pulisic at the 9. Let's put Reyna at the 9. Like, let's let Weah be the false 9 because we know that he can do it. And now we've got some depth in those positions. And should the game dictate a certain way where Brendan Aronson could actually be impactful for 35 minutes versus a final 10, we've got, I think, more depth and the ability to do that. Now the question for me, though, in that matchup is, do you go with the De La Torre, who I think maybe slows the game down and plays at a speed a step behind what our group was today in terms of reaction time, speed, and transition?
Well, true. Well, in fairness to Luca De La Torre, I think he just looks to. It's like some players will just try to play forward quickly, right? Yeah. They look to play forward quick. I think he likes to play the one that's
a connector.
He's a connector, but he also. Yeah. There's he likes to add that extra step, and I mean this in the most positive way, because I actually appreciate this as a coach and as a player myself, where he likes to play it sideways first to then see what his options are going to be, and then he gets it back, because then obviously you play it sideways, the other team shifts, and then he gets it, and he's already surveyed the landscape. Now how can I hurt you? He's more methodical in his approach. So yeah, to your point.
But Jimmy,
the
international game is a transition game now, right? It's all like the whole world's game is transition games.
Totally.
You take that side pass, that window's gone. What might not be before, where it's a little more rhythmic and get it out there and change the point of attack. Like
I get that
point of attack's got to go.
But maybe there's some value in having some of that contrast in our midfield.
Yeah,
I'm just throwing it out there. But I agree with you. The game and transition has changed, and I think at Celta where I think they utilize him really well is he puts out on the wing, and then he comes inside, right, and then he helps create that numerical advantage in and around the 9, but also with the other central midfielders. And I think he finds those pockets of space a little bit more than him just like being an out-and-out winger or he's running up and down. He can do a little bit of that, but I think he likes to come inside and look for those combination play. It just kind of depends on how you want to set up your team. But I find it interesting to have a Luca De La Torre and a Gio Reyna centrally and see what that looks like. How is Canada going to play? Can we slow the game down? Will we need to slow the game down? Anyway, I just want to say that there's value in that type of player. But tonight, we didn't necessarily needed that. We wanted to step on their throats. We wanted to go 100 miles per hour, and I think that we put enough of those players out there to make that happen. Gio obviously is a player that likes to slow it down too, but he likes to get it and kind of slalom and think dribble first and then maybe pass second. Not all the time, of course. I don't want to put these guys in these big generalizations, but I wanted to throw that out there. So who would you start then against Canada? And everybody else, drop your starting lineup in the chat right now before we get to the Greg Berhalter stuff, because I know they're all chomping at the bit to hear our thoughts on Greg.
Well, maybe if producer Alex could throw up that lineup again that we had, just so we can, so I could just look through that that list of.
I mean, let's say like this. Let me say it like this: if those two guys, Dest and McKennie, hadn't gotten red cards, would you have rolled out the same exact starting lineup?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I think if you're going to roll out that lineup, that attacking against Mexico, maybe there are some other options when you think about it. I don't think Scally's had the same form recently that he's challenging for that position with Dest, so I would keep Dest there.
Dest didn't have any form. We had no form to go off of, and he was fine tonight. So yeah, I don't know.
Well, I mean, look, Chris Richards, 4 games in the last 6 months. He was fantastic tonight. Made all the plays that I needed to. Miles Robinson hasn't been in great form recently, but he looked good tonight. Granted, you look at the collective efforts, and everybody did enough to make the person's job next to them a little bit easier, right? And Jimmy, you know what that's like. Sometimes when you feel like the guy next to you is like kind of have a night, you're like, dude, I'm going to have to cover for you. I'm already going to be struggling out on my side. Like, it can be really hard, but everybody was sort of just a step ahead of the game in a way that it made it predictable, and nobody had to make the big play. They just had to make the play, be like fundamentally really, really sound. But I would say you roll out so you lose McKennie. So I guess you kind of got to go with
if you wanted to keep going 100 miles an hour, you put Brendan Aronson there, and just make Gio slide back a little bit. It's risky.
No, you can't do that. It would have to be De La Torre or Senora.
Or you could put Cardoso and he could sit in the 6, and Musa could be off his shoulder and be the 8.
I think looking at who we have in that option, you've got to go with De La Torre. De La Torre, yeah. By the way, there's been this whole shift happening. If you watch what's happened with Man City, and there's actually teams in Major League Soccer that are doing the same thing, where they are in possession. Columbus Crew, was it Columbus Crew? No, not Columbus Crew. I'm trying to think of who was doing it recently. Where they slide a player, a center back steps into the midfield in possession and like become
John Stones with Man City.
Exactly. And there's a uniqueness to it. We don't have the ball playing center backs yet to start messing with things like that. But I was just looking at our lineup saying, oh, how can you improve things without having like wholesale changes in your formation? Like, how do you actually change the way that you play throughout a game to create some sort of imbalances? But yeah, back to the subject. Like, I was really happy with Richards. You got to keep playing him. I worry about 2 games in 4 days for guys who aren't fit, but you and I both know we've both been in situations where you're not the fittest you've ever been. You're like, I can do another 90. I can pace this out, and I got a team around me. Let's ride for it. Would you? Okay,
well, I don't know. It could be kind of fun to see. I don't know how much fun, because there's some defensive liability there if you put Brendan Aronson in there. But I could see, for me, it's between De La Torre and Cardoso, because that way you get to have someone that sits in the 6 a little more regularly for their club team, and then you could have Musa play off the shoulder. Wouldn't be surprised of seeing that, but given that De La Torre's had a really good second half with Celta and has been playing a lot more, I wouldn't mind seeing him out there and seeing how he fits in with the group, especially against a good Canada team. They're going to make you work, right? And you're going to have to really put it in on both sides of the ball. So that would be one of those two. And then for the right back position, I'd probably just throw out Scally and see how he does and not overcomplicate anything. He's another player that can get forward and obviously has plenty of experience playing for Mönchengladbach. So I'd like to see him get more meaningful minutes with the U.S. where there's
bigger
something
loss
on the line.
What's the bigger loss to you against
question.
Canada, losing McKennie or losing Dest?
Well, if you would have asked me that before the game, I probably would have said McKennie, but I thought Dest was really good tonight. And so that's Weston wasn't, and I love his spirit and his fight. That's a tough one.
It's a tough one just because of the fact that, again, like if Canada cheat numbers up and they hit us on transition 2-3 times, they can score, right? Like Canada aren't super wasteful. And if we're going to go with the attack, you have to use that attack to your advantage. Against Mexico, we did that, right? Not only were we winning the ball, not only were we keeping possession higher up the field, but when we lost it, that transitional moment to get it back before they could settle in or create something dangerous was really good by us. But we've seen with Canada, and if you looked against Panama, they spray that ball out to a winger, and if Alphonso Davies ends up starting, like you've now got Buchanan and Fons, like you can get isolated quick and they can eat you alive, you know. And so there is a little bit of a give and take of that maybe I would say McKennie's probably the bigger loss in this game than Dest. If you decided to go with Dest, and I don't know who else
well, when I think about, if Alphonso Davies is 100% and he starts this one, obviously coming off the bench and scoring a goal is going to do wonders for his confidence and his belief that he could probably go 90 or at least give you more than the 38 minutes he gave in this game against Panama. Whoever is out wide right, it's a one-on-one ultimately a lot with Alphonso Davies. So is Scally up for the task? Would Sergino have been up for the task? You know, these are big questions. It's hard to say. Yeah, that's a coin flip for me, I suppose. But big questions here.
Fons isn't in the form of his life either, right? He's coming back from his own injuries, but he's still Fons. And if you watch him today, he came in and was like, injury what, dude? Bam, goal.
Yeah, he's world class, and you have Jonathan David is, I think, scraping that world class conversation too. I mean, just his consistency of hitting the back of the net at a good level has been pretty important and impressive. And I'm very curious to see if he makes any moves during the summer